The Zombies, Mysteries, and Secrets Iceberg? Let's go. Element 115 Origins. I believe this is talking about like the origins of Element 115 and not 115 on the map Origins, I think. Through World at War, Black Ops 1, and Black Ops 2, all we really knew about the origins of 115 was that it came from space. Meteorites had come down from space and deposited 115 around the world. Many such places such as Shinonuma and the whole Tunguska event were pockets of just raw 115. And for the long time, that was pretty much the explanation. It was just meteorites containing this unknown element. Until Black Ops 3. With Black Ops 3, we did eventually learn that the Apothicans had deliberately sent 115 into a bunch of different dimensions in order to try and free themselves. After the Keepers and the Apothicans had a little spat between each other, and with the Apothicans knowing that they are going to lose, they ended up hiding the pyramid on the moon and deliberately sent meteors of 115 to Earth in hopes that humanity would one day use Element 115 and open a rift that would allow the Apothicans to escape the Dark Ether. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I'm not a huge fan of the whole Lovecraftian aspect of zombies. I preferred it a little bit more when it was more Nazi conspiracies and like behind the scenes CIA stuff instead of just saying gods and aliens are the cause of all of it. Side note, I also got some new merch for you guys. We have the official Crazy Rabbit plush. Do you want a Bunny Girl plushie? You know you do, because I do. Go to the link in the description and pre-order now. We need at least 200 pre-orders for this thing to actually get made, and I will have a direct hand in creating it, so you know it's going to be pretty freaking awesome. And in case we do not hit the required amount, the pre-orders are refundable. You can pre-order with like $2. So if you really want a Bunny Girl plushie, go down there and pre-order right now. Primus and Ultimus. Primus and Ultimus are the main characters that we play as through different games. So World at War and Black Ops 1 would be Ultimus, Richtofen, Dempsey, Takio, and Nikolai. And with Black Ops 2 Origins, we got introduced to the Primus crew. We got Primus, Richtofen, Nikolai, Dempsey, and Takio. They would be these same characters, but from different dimensions. And the reason for the multiple dimensions thing was just a way for them to explain some of the inconsistencies and some of the holes in the zombie storyline up until that point. Because at that point, Jimmy Zielinski was on his way out and had already put us into Buried, and Jason Blundell used this as a way to write themselves out. Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man. Dr. Monty, at face value, is some old British guy with a cool scarf, but in actuality, he is a keeper, and has existed since the very beginning of the universe. And the Shadow Man was at one point considered his best friend. And due to being corrupted by the energy of the Dark Ether, he would eventually turn into what we know nowadays as the Shadow Man. And in a way to try to save his friend, Dr. Monty would also become corrupted by the Dark Ether, and with this, a war between the Keepers and the Shadow Man and the other corrupted Keepers would break out, with the corrupted Keepers eventually losing and being banished to the Dark Ether, where they would eventually become the Apothicans. And Dr. Monty after this would eventually kind of take the role as a pseudo-god and would try to keep the balance of the universe. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, I really dislike the whole god, keeper, alien thing. I'm not a fan of it. Dead Wives. This is a reference to OG Nikolai's many dead wives. As you are playing World at War and Black Ops 1, a lot of times Nikolai will reference many of his past wives, and many of them did not meet a happy ending. Now, there is a constant debate in the zombies community whether this is canon or not. A lot of people will be like, yes, at the time of World at War and Black Ops 1, it was canon, and eventually it was written to just be a drunken hallucination. Looking at you, Gorod Grovey. So whether you wanted to believe it or not, I personally do, because at the time of World at War and Black Ops 1, they wanted it to be canon. So I'm gonna believe it is. Now, if you are interested in knowing the fate of all of Nikolai's many wives, well, you're in luck. I actually have made a video about this in the past, and I'm gonna let past me take over because I think I did a pretty good job. So Nikolai, canonically, has had 9 wives, and the first one happened to meet her end with a shotgun.
The same weapon I used to kill my first wife. She was bitch.
You are ugly, like first wife.
Like my first wife, useless. I used this to kill a bear once. She was my first wife.
His second wife also met an end by a gun, but it wasn't a shotgun, it was a PPSH.
Same weapon I used to kill my second wife. It was accident. She talked too much.
Oh, the electricity dancing on their corpses is so beautiful! Like second wife.
His third wife was apparently a really good cook.
You are like third wife, always asking for more. I have black hole. Like my third wife, we won't talk about that.
Smells like third wife's cooking. I loved it.
Dempsey. I like him because he's brave. Like third wife. He's going to die one day, but he'll take many with him. Like fourth wife. Hey.
Now his fourth wife, I think, is the one he probably hated the most. She took his money and ran, and he chased her down and killed her with his bare hands.
First it takes my money, then it disappears. Just like my fourth wife. Oh, that smells disgusting. Like my fourth wife. She pretty, though. Pretty and smelly. Weird combo. Guess I'll have to use my bare hands, like with my fourth wife. Always talking.
Shouldn't have kept them in that extra 30 seconds. Like fourth wife. Ugly kid. I have finally made it to the moon. You were wrong, fourth wife. You were wrong. Sexy weapon for sexy Russian. Most women think so, at least. Fourth wife, not so much. Small and powerful. Like fourth wife. No, they were all big. They could plow field.
His fifth wife is the one from the World at War bio that was mysteriously killed when she was cleaning an axe with her neck. The only thing we know about the sixth wife is that she had like the Gluck Gluck 9000.
This thing sucks harder than sixth wife.
Now Nikolai's seventh wife might be one of the only ones that lived to tell the tale.
Oh, you're much cuter now, zombie. Like seventh wife. Thank God, I can go home and tell seventh wife I now make double points. And about new girlfriend.
Now the eighth wife we really don't know anything about, at least there was no quotes about it in Black Ops 1. But the ninth wife apparently was the one that died when they blew up the Earth.
Haha! Goodbye, wife number 9! I do not think I will be able to top that one. She died when I blew up the Earth! Fun times! I will miss her.
Bus Route B. This is a reference to Transit and many of its cut content. Originally, Transit was supposed to be much different, and I have a full video where I talk about all of the egregious cut content that they took out of Transit, and I'll leave a link in the description. Make sure to check it out. But to sum it up, originally Transit was supposed to have a day and night cycle. And with the daytime, you would have a certain bus schedule, and with the nighttime, you would have a certain bus schedule. And at spawn, we can even see some remnants of this when you look at this poster. It shows you the times for the day bus route, and it also shows you times for the B or the night bus route. And even some of Ted's quotes may even hint towards it.
New route announcement engaged. Now approaching Consolidated Coach Corporation Bus Depot. New route learned. Cross-referencing mapping software. Automatic route guidance still in effect. Error. Bus transponder non-operational. Defaulting to programmed route cycle. Now arriving Savannah River Tritium K reactor. Error. Global positioning system navigation error. Maintain current course. Implement automatic course upgrade protocols.
So yes, there was originally going to be a bus route B, but because of many reasons, mainly because of console limitations and having to crunch down, and we'll talk about the console limitations here in a little bit, they were unable to implement majority of the things that they wanted to in Transit, so unfortunately, it was cut. Super Easter egg. Now, I believe this is just referencing the Black Ops 4 Super Easter egg that never was. So Super Easter eggs have been a thing for quite a long time. Arguably, you could say that it did begin in Black Ops 1, because you would not be able to get the Golden Rod without doing the Shangri-La Easter egg, and therefore making the Moon Easter egg impossible. But in reality, the main Super Easter eggs kinda did start with Black Ops 2, and continued into Black Ops 3, but Black Ops 4 did not have one. And the reason for this is just because Activision. They're the reason behind a lot of things. Originally, Black Ops 4 Zombies was supposed to be way more maintained and a lot bigger and better. But due to a bunch of reasons behind the scenes, Activision ended up pulling a lot of people from Treyarch to start working on the next game instead of maintaining and polishing Black Ops 4. So with even less people working on the game than usual, they had to make a lot of sacrifices. And it seems like the Super Easter egg was one of them. Black Ops 4 budget cuts. Like I just stated, Activision is the reason for majority of the problems in Call of Duty. Greedy Activision, man. Tale as old as time. Throughout Black Ops 4's life cycle, a lot of people from Treyarch were taken to work on the next game, leaving less and less people to actually finish up Black Ops 4. And that's the reason a lot of things just fell through.
Has this ever happened to you? I have so many games. What do I play? Well, you're in luck, because today's sponsor is War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made and is now available for free on PC, and consoles. Take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of over 10 major nations. Wow! War Thunder! Where incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time. So join the worldwide community of over 70 million players in epic PvP battles today. Some of my favorite aspects of the game are the in-depth customization, which allows you, the player, to customize your vehicle in tons of different ways. And with 3 distinct game modes, whether it's arcade mode, simulator mode, or realistic mode. So, what are you doing? Go get War Thunder. It's free on not only PC, but also on consoles. So make sure to sign up using my link in the comments and in the pinned description. You'll get a massive bonus pack that is available for new and returning players that haven't played for at least 6 months. So if you would like to get multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator, Eagle of Valor, and 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account, it's only available for a limited time. So, use my link and support War Thunder.
Lovecraft influence. Zombies for a while now has had a pretty strong Lovecraftian influence on it, and this can all really be attributed to Jason Blundell. He himself even has said that he's a huge fan of a lot of different cultures' mythos.
I love mythology. So I've collected mythology through my travels. Every time I used to go to a country, I used to ask for their local mythology and used to collect that. I was very blessed to do a lot of traveling when I was younger.
Oh, that's awesome.
So even like, really obscure stuff, and it sounds strange, but like, Germany, you go there and they've got their old Siegfried stuff, all these kind of things, and you're like, wow, this is amazing.
So it's no surprise that since he has this huge love of this, he's gonna probably try to insert it more and more into zombies. Now, is that for the better or for the worse? That will be up to you to decide. Transit hardware limitations. Like I stated earlier, a lot of the things that were taken out of Transit should really be considered a crime against humanity. Again, check out my Black Ops 2 cut content video, link is down there below in the description. But Transit had so much taken out of it that its concept and what we got are two completely different things. And one of the main reasons for this is hardware limitations. Now, it's not exactly hardware limitations. The Xbox 360 and the PS3 probably could have handled a lot of what they wanted to do. But because Activision is known for pumping out a game every year and not really giving studios enough time to polish the games, they would not have been able to fine-tune Transit to actually make it work. I mean, look at Call of Duties nowadays. Those things are like hundreds of gigabytes to download. That's insane. When games that should take way more space aren't even half of that. So Call of Duties are just horribly optimized, and the main reason for that is because they are kind of rushed. So Transit was never able to get fully optimized, and because they had to rush it, hardware limitations would kind of be the reason. So if there's anything to take away from this, it's just that Activision is evil. Very evil.
Its ambition was definitely kind of greater than what the final release was.
Okay.
When it was being proposed, and that was Jimmy was kind of working on that at the time.
Of course.
It had lots of game modes and different versions that you could run. So people that kind of know at the moment, there's standard mode, and then there was grief, right?
Yep.
Well, Transit was being constructed. It had like 4 or 5 different entirely different ways of playing it. It was very exciting, and it actually kind of suffered from its ambition in a weird way. Lots of different modes. It was really fun, but all the modes were kind of a quarter halfway there. And at the time, again, Black Ops 2, right? Black Ops 2.
Yep.
It was on the back end of kind of development. In other words, Zombies got the kind of the minimum amount of support in the group. Now, when I say minimum amount of support, you're still talking about 30 odd guys, which used to be back in the day when I was young. That was team sizes,
Of course.
For maps of this size and complexity, it was quite a small team. The problem that happened was, as we got closer to the end of development, something that Jimmy faced was that, and he'll be able to speak about this far better than I would, but what happened was there was a call which was like, okay, we can't get all these modes to the kind of standard we want, so we need to make the call to kind of strip them away and switch them off. But that decision was made, unfortunately, a little bit too late. And so what happened is the core experience that got released had a bunch of things where, if that's all they'd focused on, some of those rough edges would have been smoothed out.
Okay.
And so that's the kind of I'm sure, let's put it this way, if Jim was to sit down and look at that, he would probably make a series of strategic changes if he'd had the full development just looking at that map and just with that focus. Because he was doing some really ambitious stuff with the different game modes, and it just ran out of time.
Kino der Toten World at War. I would hope everybody would know about this one, but originally Kino der Toten was supposed to be the 4th DLC in World at War Zombies. Things such as the Nova Crawlers that we come to know and love today that appeared in Black Ops 1 would have originally appeared in World at War, and other things such as the Engineer and the Chainsaw, and many other things would have actually appeared in the World at War version of Kino der Toten. But due to the fact that they needed more people to work on Black Ops 1, and the DLC would have released way too close to Modern Warfare 2, they ended up holding off on the DLC and ended up using Kino der Toten as the starter map for Black Ops 1. Paris map. Paris was hinted at as a zombies map all the way back in World at War Zombies. In Der Riese on the chalkboard, you can find images of what looks to be a zombie standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. So for a pretty long time, people assumed that we would eventually get our Paris map. And it looked like in Black Ops 1 that was going to be the case for the final send-off map. But due to the fact that they thought Paris just wasn't a big enough way to end the game off on, they decided to head to the moon instead. And this change was so late in development that even in the game files, Moon is still referred to as Paris. And during an interview that Johnny J did with Jason Blundell actually kind of lays out how the Paris map would have worked out.
We were starting to write stuff for a DLC 4 at the time as well, so create stuff as well. And that's where you'll hear about like Paris and Coast and a cinema, and that got re-adopted into Kino, and then the Coast map got turned into Call of the Dead, and then the Paris map got turned into Moon.
I've heard about that. I guess the Moon in the early stages was Paris, and then it got reworked into being on the moon.
Well,
how do you make that jump?
So they and it was a fantastic team. It was a different kind of group of guys, but a fantastic team took it, and then just certain of the little ideas got moved. And I don't want to say it was just Paris, because it wasn't. Paris is a very different map, but Paris had the idea of a no man's land, and it had the Eiffel Tower, and then underneath that was a teleporter, and then there was the catacombs of Paris underneath that, and the idea was that you went into the kind of teleporter, and the Eiffel Tower was essentially a conduit for the power for it, and then you got transported to this middle of nowhere where the Pack-a-Punch was, and it was just zombies all coming at you, and there was no cover, and it was brutal.
So would say the zombies all coming at you, would that maybe be reworked into like the no man's land we had in Moon?
Yeah. So that was that idea that kind of moved over.
Kino blank portrait. This one is pretty interesting because I do believe it has two different answers depending on when in Zombies you're asking the question. So in Kino der Toten, there are a bunch of portraits hanging on the wall, and one of them is blank. And interacting with the portrait, each character will have some unique dialogue.
Maybe what was is no more, but shall be again.
This one didn't photograph so well.
Hey, look! It's nobody! Hey, someone stole the image from this picture.
So who could this blank portrait actually be? Well, for a long time in Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 and 3, people assumed that it was Pablo, the test subject that Tank Dempsey ultimately replaced.
Log entry 1471. Date, September 2nd, 1845. Diary. Another day, another failure. This time, subject N3WB just blankly at the floor. The Russian subject still smells like urine, even after he was given a bath and deloused twice. And I think I might have killed the specimen from Mexico. His spleen is on the floor, and he's not moving anymore. I can verify with certainty, however, that the barrier is not located in the spleen. Dr. Continue no matter the cost. I wonder what he might think of the experiment with the little girl. Nice! Drop that! Nicely!
And this would make a little sense as to why it's blank, because he's no longer needed. And there were tons of other theories that made it seem like maybe it was Maxis, or maybe that it was Peter McCain, but a lot of people seem to assume that it was Pablo. Now, if we fast forward all the way to Classified, it seems like we may have an answer to it. In Classified, you can do a little Easter egg that reveals that a blank portrait hanging on the wall is actually Primus Nikolai. And what's interesting is if you do that, Dempsey will give you this quote.
Damn it, Treyarch! Are you fucking with the storyline again?
Now, I'm not gonna lie, this does seem like it was kind of shoehorned in at the last second, and the blank portrait was never originally from the start meant to be Primus Nikolai. They just kind of threw it in there to try to explain it. Because if there's one thing we know about zombies, is that they kind of make the story up as they go, with a lot of feedback from the zombies community. So I think if you were to ask this question back before Black Ops 4, the answer was probably Pablo, or Maxis. They each have a pretty good say in that. But after Black Ops 4, it seems like they wanted to go a different direction with it, and eventually made it Nikolai. Richtofen is Shadow Man's apprentice. Back in Black Ops 1 Moon, we kinda had a couple hints to the Shadow Man, or that there was some mysterious power lurking in the pyramid. When you're doing the Easter egg, Samantha will give you this quote.
The blackness will swallow your pride. Something far more terrible than you lies here.
In exploring through some of the radios on Moon, we can also get this one where Richtofen first interacts with the pyramid and starts hearing these voices in his head.
Entry 42. Date, January 4, 1940. Dr. Schuster and I, despite mounting pressure from Dr. Maxis, have continued working on the matter transference prototype. We have made great strides in the last 30 days and are ready for our first human subject. If our calculations are correct, we will send a test subject, me, to the receptacle station sitting 30 yards away and behind a cinder block wall.
Are you certain you want to do this, Dr. Richtofen?
Nein, Dr. Schuster. But this must be done. Quickly, put in your earplugs and power up the machine. Is there a power outage? Why is it so dark? I feel almost weightless. How very unexpected. Dr. Schuster? Hello? There. I can see now. Oh my God. I'm standing in a circular cave, surrounded by some kind of machinery. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. It looks almost alien in nature. There's a pyramid structure in the center of the room. I'm going to try and carefully touch it. Ah! Static electricity. It's smooth to the touch. Very cold. Not a speck of dust. Might be hollow. The chamber is quite large. I see what looks like capacitors in the ceiling of the chamber, but there are no obvious connections to anything electrical. What is this place? Dr. Schuster? Is that you? Dr. Schuster? Look at this. It appears to be covered in some kind of hieroglyphic language. I've not seen anything like it before. Why are you whispering to me? There's no need for that. This is loose. Do you hear that? It sounds like
My God! What happened? I seem to be in some kind of jungle. I can't be certain of where I am.
So with all that information, we slowly start to piece together that maybe something is influencing Richtofen to act the way he does. And we kind of got confirmation with Revelations. In Revelations, there is a wisp that gives you this bit of dialogue from the Shadow Man.
You do know that Richtofen is a friend of mine. I say friend, but really he's so much more than that. At one point, I almost considered him my apprentice. I mean, he did stab my reporter friend and steal the summoning key. But at one point, he did everything I told him to. I keep hoping he'll remember the promise he made to me so long ago.
So it would seem that Richtofen was primed to be the Shadow Man's apprentice, but things didn't turn out the way he thought. Blood vials. Blood vials are a kind of tricky situation to understand in zombies, so I'll try to explain it as best as I can. Blood vials are basically an insurance policy. Richtofen knew that after the map Revelations, that they would basically be destroyed. They would be erased from existence along with the Apothecans. And his goal was to get said insurance policy so that Dr. Monty couldn't do that. Well, this all kind of fit into Dr. Monty's plan of having them continue the cycle, because after Revelations, he sends them to the Great War, and the cycle repeats itself. And Dr. Monty wants this so that way he can continue to stay in power. Now, the blood vials come from universes that were already closed off, so you have the mobsters from Mob of the Dead and Victus, which is the crew that you play as during Transit and majority of Black Ops 2. Now, because the premise crew has the blood of universes that have already been closed off, it creates a paradox and thus allows them to continue going. So pretty much, blood vials are blood from universes that no longer exist and are used to continue existing. Hopefully that summed it up. There's a lot more to it, like storyline-wise, but essentially that's what the blood vials are. Transit cut map locations. Like I said, Transit had plenty of cut content, and just a tad bit more of it was going to be a bunch of extra maps that were cut. So as of today, we only have Bus Depot, Farm, Town, and Diner. Those are the only subsections of Transit that you can jump in and play. But originally, there would have been a couple others. You would have had Cornfields, which probably is exactly what you're thinking. You would have also had Nocturne Totem for the 100th million time. That kind of explains why it's in Transit. You would have also had Power Station and Tunnel. And we even had some concept art from the map selection screen, and man, it just really makes you sad of seeing what could have been. Dempsey Was Here. Dempsey Was Here is the file name for the Game Over song on Transit. Not only is it a reference to the Kilroy Was Here meme from World War II, like the real-life World War II, that meme actually scared the Nazis a little bit, but it's also a reference to the fact that Dempsey consistently breaks the fourth wall, thus editing the file name to Dempsey Was Here. Chaos/Dark Ether connection. The Chaos story was the story of Black Ops 4. Well, part of the story. It was the storyline of the maps like 9, Dead of the Night, and Ancient Evil. And the Dark Ether would be the zombie storyline that we see nowadays. And you wouldn't think that these two stories really connect, but they actually do, and that's all thanks to everyone's favorite game, Call of Duty Vanguard. In that map on Shinonuma, there is a radio that actually references a character from the Chaos story, Alistair Rhodes.
It reminds me of when I studied the writings of Alistair Rhodes, an amateur demonologist and personal hero of mine. Rhodes wrote about different objects of power that he called sentinel artifacts, but I was never able to find out exactly what they were. Nevertheless, if we can find the relic we seek at Shinonuma, I am quite certain I can use it on Von List and trap Cortifex in that little scepter of his.
Shangri-La is on Mars. This has been an ongoing discussion in the zombies community ever since the days of Black Ops 1. Even back then, there was still a huge debate on whether Shangri-La takes place on Earth in the Himalayas or on a completely different planet. And that discussion still continues on to this day. And there is actually a pretty decent amount of evidence to point to the fact that Shangri-La may not be on Mars now, but was at one point on Mars. The first piece of evidence that kinda clued everyone into this would be in the game files. In the game files, this mountain range is actually referred to as Mars. And that's just such a random thing to do that it can't possibly be a coincidence or anything else. It was definitely deliberate. And if we combine that with Jimmy Zielinski's very cryptic tweets throughout the years of Shangri-La and Mars, it all kind of adds up. Back in 2013, a lifetime ago, CNN tweeted life on Mars was once possible, says NASA. And Jimmy Zielinski, who was the big man in charge of zombies in case you didn't know, responded, sounds like paradise. And in another tweet thread, they referred to the Shangri-La Mountains as zombies' best kept secret. So with all these cryptic tweets pointing at Shangri-La and Mars, it only further added fuel to the fire. And one of the biggest pieces of evidence has to be in Black Ops 3. During the solar eclipse that you do for the Easter egg, the moon used for the solar eclipse is actually one of Mars's moons. It's not the Earth's moon, it's Mars. This moon. That sounded really weird. So this just further adds to the fact that Shangri-La might not be on Mars now, but it definitely was at one point. And the last and final piece of evidence takes place in Black Ops 4. In Tag der Toten, you can do an Easter egg where you seemingly appear on one of Mars's moons, and you get a very beautiful view of Mars sitting right in front of you. And what's interesting is that the music that is playing here is also the same music that plays in the Shangri-La loading screen. So what exactly is going on? We really don't have a 100% explanation. To me, it seems like this was one of those things that Jimmy Zielinski maybe at one point in time really wanted to focus on and dive deeper into, but they ended up kind of scrapping the idea or pushing it aside in favor of other ones. But it does seem like at one point in time, Shangri-La was on Mars. And due to teleportation shenanigans, time displacement 115, and probably various other means, it somehow got taken to the Himalayas. And when you're doing the Easter egg, you actually go back in time and space to when it was on Mars. And like I said, we really don't have 100% concrete evidence of what exactly was going on, and it seems like they really had big things planned but ended up shelving it for other things, so we may never know the full extent of what they actually wanted to accomplish here. Cut Monty and Shadowman announcer quotes on Revelations. On Revelations, exactly as the entry described, there are a bunch of Cut, Monty, and Shadowman announcer quotes. So you know the people that say insta-kill, max ammo, double points, stuff like that? There was a set of quotes for each of them, and it seemed to have been cut before the map's official release. So maybe they had plans for other Easter eggs or a different way to tell the story. We may never know, but we do have these quotes.
Max ammo. Bonus points. Carpenter. Double points. Fire sale. Insta-kill. Minigun.
Kaboom! Bonus points. Carpenter. Double points. Fire sale. Insta-kill. Minigun.
Icarus on the Giant. Icarus is the plane that you build in Mob of the Dead to take to Pack-a-Punch. And what's interesting about this is you can also find it on the Giant. In the FAR teleporter up on the roof, you can see the plane just sitting there. And you might be wondering, how do we get from Mob of the Dead to the Giant? It just doesn't make any sense. But that's not the only time we see this plane. After the Easter egg in Shadows of Evil, you can see the plane flying over the map. And you can also see it in Zetsubo no Shima jumping in and out of time pockets. So why is this plane flying in various maps? Well, this would be answered in a cipher on Gorod Krovi. The cipher reads, "It was a strange flight. The plane crashed, we passed through time and space, in a way, flying over areas that shouldn't have been there. There was no sign of any remains. I do not know where it landed, honest." So it seems like as the plane is flying, you are jumping in and out of different dimensions or time pockets or whatever fancy science words you want to use, and that would be why you see the plane in various areas. And after the plane ends up going off on its own, it seems like it ended up landing in the Giant, and that's why you find it there. Shadows of Evil Impossible Easter Egg. So this one is actually really interesting because we actually do have some very, very recent updates. I'm talking about like 2 days ago updates by the time I'm making this. So there is an Easter egg in Black Ops 3 that Jason Blundell himself has said probably won't be solved for another 8 years. And this was 8 years ago.
So going into Black Ops 3, I'm fed up now, and I'm going to really put one in that you guys can't break, and they'll be hidden in different arenas, and you won't get this one. One of the assumptions I make when we talk about big Easter eggs or things that are kind of hidden and other stuff that's going on, I assume that everyone is going to take the code, take the Radiant, and take it apart. Which means anything that we could put in script, and anything I could put in with Radiant, I'm assuming you could just open it up and find it.
Yep.
So if you're seeing anything and it looks like it's engineered, you're probably off because you'd have already found that by now. Well, it's like, and here's the thing, I know there's intensity in the community. I think I may be talking about this in about another 8 years' time.
Wow.
So here's the thing, just to crush everyone's dreams.
Okay, the official statement.
You can ask me all you want. I'm going to put that away in a vault and talk to you again about it in 8 years' time.
Okay.
Now the entry says Shadows of Evil Impossible Easter Egg, but it's pretty much been confirmed that it is not on the map Shadows of Evil, but across the game as a whole. And the reason I said that there are updates is because a YouTuber, I'm going to butcher your name, dude, I'm so sorry, Skyped in it, I'm so sorry if I got that wrong, uploaded a bombshell of a video titled The Impossible Easter Egg Finally Found, Jason Blundell's 8-year secret. Now this video is 30 minutes long. Go watch it. I'm link in the description, check it out. I didn't think I'd be that invested in it, but I actually was. And in this video, I'll sum it up as best I can because I'm not that smart. But in this video, it talks about how the secret to the impossible Easter egg all comes down to the KN-44 and the hypercube. And if you don't know what the hypercube is, think back to the Giant and the scraps of paper that we had to find. That, when put together, would make this image with the KN-44 in the middle. And in this video, he goes through so many different theories and down so many different avenues, but it seems like he's on the right track. We finally think we have a lead on what the impossible Easter egg actually is. It has something to do with the KN-44 and the hypercube. What those have to do with anything, we're not 100% sure yet, but we finally know at least something about this impossible Easter egg that even Jason Blundell himself said probably wouldn't be solved for another 8 years. But I wouldn't be surprised if by the time the next Zombies game actually comes out, we might be ever closer to solving this. Richtofen Head in Mob. Richtofen's Head in Mob was actually a piece of cut content, and I actually talked about this many times in the past, so I'm going to let past me come in here and speed this video up a little bit. Richtofen's head was cut from Black Ops 2 and was going to appear on the map in Mob of the Dead. The head would have been of Ultimus Richtofen, and even Jason Blundell himself refers to it as the snapping Richtofen head. And we do even have some of the audio and the animations for it.
Ouchie, my head! You look great! Get your fingers out of me! Hey, I'm over here! Why don't you come and pick me up? Let's play toss the head. Stop leaving me on the ground. God, it's really dirty on the ground. Come and get me.
So it is a shame that back in Black Ops 2, we never got to throw Richtofen's head around on Mob of the Dead. Dimension 2210. Dimension 2210 is just one of the handfuls of different dimensions that we have in the Zombies timeline. First introduced with the Zombies timeline image, as well as being mentioned in Black Ops 4, not too much is really known about this, except for that after the events of Shadows of Evil, Richtofen uses the summoning key to travel to this dimension and collect the soul of his native Richtofen, which required him to kill the young innocent Richtofen and bring his soul to the house. And really, not too much else is known about this dimension other than the fact that this is where Richtofen collected his soul from. Baby Gun Elemental Upgrades. Shangri-La is very interesting because it has a lot of cut content. A lot more than you would think for the third DLC map. Like, you would think that this one would be pretty set in stone, but they actually toyed around with it a lot. And one of the things that they really messed around with was the shrink ray concepts. And we actually do have a lot of concept images of all the various concepts that they thought of for the Baby Maker. And I actually have a cut content video that I will link down below in the description that talks about this way more in depth, but if you want to read it for yourself, just pause the video and enjoy. And man, some of these concept ideas were actually pretty freaking cool. Not saying that the shrink ray isn't cool itself, but the rest of these ideas were also pretty freaking cool too. Zetsumonoshima Distant Monster. Now, little Easter eggs like this I actually really do kind of enjoy. So upon reaching round 50 in Zetsumonoshima, very large monster can be heard and seen in the distance from Lab B. Now, not too much really is known about what this is, but it's still a pretty freaking cool and creepy Easter egg, and I love creepy Easter eggs. Sacrifice of 4 souls creates a pocket dimension. So pocket dimensions in zombies are pretty interesting because what we know now, Dr. Monty is essentially a god and can see and pretty much do almost anything. But a pocket dimension seems to be outside the scope of what he can and cannot interact with. Basically isolated and locked off from all the other realms, with Dr. Monty being unable to interact with it. And this would be why Richtofen goes back to the labs in Mob of the Dead. But it seems like in order to create a pocket dimension, you're gonna have to sacrifice 4 souls. And we see this in both Mob of the Dead and Shadows of Evil. In Mob of the Dead, we see that the souls of the 4 mobsters are what is holding the pocket dimension together. And in Morgue City, we see that the crew that we play as there may also be the 4 souls that are holding this pocket dimension together. So essentially, to create one, you're going to need to sacrifice 4 souls, and you would want one to make sure that no other prying eyes can interfere. Cut Vietnam Map. Like I stated earlier, Shangri-La actually had a lot of cut content. And another tidbit of said cut content would be the cut maps. There were actually 2 cut maps that ended up being combined to make Shangri-La, and that would be the Temple of Doom and the Viet Cong. And yes, that's what the map internally was called, Viet Cong. And again, if you go watch my cut content video, we dive way more deeper into this. But we do have tons of concept art of certain areas in the map and these certain types of enemies that you would face. Like the many different variants of the Viet Cong zombies, and even the mutated meteor-infected zombie, or the NVA smokescreen zombie, or like the VC martial arts zombie, which was actually pretty cool because like he would like break his limbs and like run at you in really creepy ways. And I mean, hell, they even had a zombie oxen. Like, how cool is that? Group 601. What if I told you that there was a mysterious group in zombies that has only been referenced a handful of times, if that, and is so secretive that majority of people have never even heard of them? And that would be Group 601. First referenced all the way back in World at War. If you boot up a co-op game of Der Riese, in the bottom left, instead of seeing the Group 935 logo, you will see the Group 601 logo. And then if we fast forward into Black Ops 1, only accessible in the files and never actually used in-game, we can see the Group 601 logo again, with a huge mushroom cloud behind it and 2 antennas, and these German words that I'm not going to try to pronounce that reads strength through order. And that's not the last time we actually got a reference to this group. There is one more. In Black Ops 3 campaign and zombies, just looking on the ground, you're going to find that it's covered in litter. And some of these pieces of paper also have the Group 601 logo, the very same one that was unused in Black Ops 1. So who exactly, or what exactly, is this mysterious organization? Are they actually the ones responsible for everything behind the scenes? And was Group 935 just the front guys? Was this a secret organization actually run by Richtofen? Well, the real answer might be kind of disappointing. It's none of those things. It seems like Group 601 was just the placeholder name until they found a name that they actually liked and went with, which was Group 935. And it would seem like they just forgot to edit a couple files, and that's why you'll see Group 601 in random places, because they never updated it. That's why you'll see it in the co-op screen, but not when you load up solo. But hey, I could always be wrong. Maybe there is actually a Group 601 hiding somewhere out there in the shadows. Maybe one day we'll get the truth. Editing Rabbit here, I think I found some more information about Group 601, so I decided to throw it in here now. So a couple years ago, a bunch of old assets intended for Black Ops 1 Kino der Toten popped up from the game's art director. And it seems like these images were what you were supposed to be seeing on the projector instead of what we actually got. With the first couple images of zombies attacking some random jabroni with the words attack on it written in German. And the next couple images might look a little familiar. It's the Group 601 logo with and without the actual Group 601 part. And then we can see a map of Europe with what looks to be like the zombie army machine crawling out and taking it over, with the words today Europe, then the whole world. And then another image that says Step 4 with it coming over to America. And then we get some images of what looks to be our Nazi zombie army, with the words undead soldiers stand together and the words obey written on them. And the last image is actually really interesting because we get some old scientist looking man who could have possibly been Dr. Maxis. Maybe this is what they were originally intending for him to actually look like. And since it says obey, maybe they were using this to make the zombies obey Dr. Maxis. The next couple images are pretty interesting. We get one that says Dr. Maxis, scene 24, take 8. And we see Dr. Maxis holding what seems to be a dog, presumably Fluffy, and then another scientist that's big, buff, and bald, pointing at the teleporter that is going off, and then the last image would be what looks to be a hellhound. Now, if this is true, and these were all images that were going to appear on the projector, I feel like this could have had major changes to how we view Kino der Toten and how we view the zombie storyline as a whole. So maybe Group 601 was actually the group at Kino der Toten. This would make the intro line that you get from Richtofen when booting it up a little bit more interesting, because he says, how many other research stations does this group have?
Entry 741021! Perhaps this station will hold the key to the real goals of Group 935. I still do not trust my unconventional allies, but they are of great use to me. But I digress. Who would have thought the MDT was capable of time travel? How many stations does this group have? Where did that little girl disappear to? Only time will tell what new questions await us in this theater of the damned.
So maybe he was never talking about Group 935 and was talking about Group 601. Just a couple things for you to think about. Maybe Group 601 was actually a real thing. Premise, killing each other. During Black Ops 3's life cycle, we had numerous videos come out, and in those videos we would see Premise not really meeting a favorable end. In some of them they would die to zombies or the quote-unquote boss zombie, and it appears like in some of them they ended up killing each other. And if we take a look at this Revelations quote, it would kinda make sense.
On over 18 million occasions, Dempsey gave his life for the sake of his team. He's a bona fide American hero.
This is not their first time doing this. They've been doing this for a while, so it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that at some points they got into disagreements and ended up killing each other. Unsolved ciphers. There are plenty of unsolved ciphers in Black Ops 3. The Giant has one, Gorod Krovi has one, and Revelations has a couple. And I believe if we wanted to solve the super impossible Easter egg that I talked about earlier, I think one of these ciphers may be a hint or a key to it, but we're going on like, what, almost 8 years now since this game came out, and if it hasn't been solved now, it might be a while before we ever actually solve them. Ancient city beneath Morgue City. So I think this is just talking about the Pack-a-Punch room in Shadows of Evil, and how like there was a bunch of theories back in Shadows of Evil's heyday that there was more to this room than we think. People thought that you would be able to get like under Pack-a-Punch and explore a whole new area, but we do know that that ended up being nothing. But it wouldn't be too far-fetched. It does seem like there is something down there. Like we can explore and find interesting things down there, but in reality, we can't, and this is just one of those theories that people seem to believe back in the day. Now, storyline-wise, we don't really know too much about this location at all even. But we do know that it was used by the Ancient Order of the Keepers, and may have used this room for some human sacrifices.
Hey, Mr. Rat. So, I went by the market again today. For some reason, the fruit seller was much more talkative. Even if what he said was more than a little crazy. He told me that when he was a boy, his uncle would get drunk and start talking about how a dark force cast its shadow over the city. How good and evil were battling right on our doorstep. And that the only thing holding back the forces of the apocalypse was the Ancient Order of the Keepers. Well, even if what he said was more than a little crazy, I'm not sure he was. Even though they're scared, or maybe because they are, people are talking more. Asking around, I've heard more than a few whispers about this Ancient Order and the Keepers. I think it's some kind of cult. They say you can hear them chanting sometimes. From beneath the city. There's all these rumors about human sacrifices and freaky shit that even the police won't investigate. Because they've been paid off, or because they're too damn scared. I'm not sure what to believe anymore.
Peter's grave. This is one of my favorite little Easter eggs in like all of Zombies history, but in the Call of Duty Zombies mobile app from way back in the day, probably before a lot of you may have even been born, in that version's Shinonuma, there was an Easter egg where you could discover Peter's grave, aka the hanging man in Shinonuma. All you had to do was open all of the huts and get all of the Perca-Cola machines to spawn in. Now remember, you're playing this on a phone. It's not like you're playing this on an Xbox or something, so it's a little harder to do that on a phone. But once you do that, a message will appear saying all areas unlocked, now go find the grave, and your knife will be replaced with a shovel, and you just have to walk around until you see an icon that says dig, and if you do that, you will be rewarded with the Wonderwaffe DG2. It was a nice little Easter egg for the mobile app, and I wonder if at the time they ever really wanted to do anything more with this, like actually implement it into like actual zombies, or if this was just like a one-off kind of thing. Premise statues in Shang. This could be talking about one of two things. One, actual like OG Shangri-La, where this one statue to the right of spawn, people have said kind of resembles the Premise statues, but I think that's just a whole nothing burger. Or on Revelations after Shangri-La on your way to Der Eisendrache, you can come by this little area where there are 4 Premise statues. And I always just like thought this was a part of Der Eisendrache, but it does come right after the Pack-a-Punch, well, the quote-unquote Pack-a-Punch area for Shangri-La. So maybe this is kind of hinting that there was actual Premise statues behind the Pack-a-Punch in Shangri-La. Or this could all just be completely nothing, and that's what I'm going to go with. This is all kind of nothing. Dimension traveling missiles. Now I could not find anything about this on the interwebs. I searched high and low, but I couldn't find a thing talking about this. But I eventually found the Reddit post for this Iceberg, and in that, OP actually explained this entry a little bit. He said, interdimensional missiles is a reference to the interdimensional modules we see in Gorod Krovi. There's a theory that states missiles using the same technology as the modules in Gorod Krovi were used to destroy Agartha/the house, which explains the fallout radios from Maxis in The Giant. And that would make a little sense. I don't really completely believe this, but I mean, there might be some truth to it because those radios on The Giant are a little hard to understand, but we'll talk about that more on a later entry down on the list because I think I might have figured it out. Stullinger is alive in the dark ether. This is talking about the classified phone call that you can get that hints that the Victus crew is still alive after the events of Tag der Toten.
Hello? Is this thing on? Richtofen! Hey, Richtofen! You've been gone from my head a really long time. I gotta be honest, I'm freaking out a bit, man. It's so quiet. I can actually hear myself think. Do you know what that's like? It's not nice at all. So, listen, buddy, old pal, we gotta talk. You sent us here, of all places, but you forgot to tell us what to do. It's dark, it's damp, it's just really filthy. I think the roaches are crawling with roaches. How is that even possible? Wait, shoot. Am I even talking to the right Richtofen? Oh, you could be the other one, right? Or the other one. Yeah, you know what? Just go talk to your Richtofen pals at the hoity-toity Ricky Gang Clubhouse and find out what the we're supposed to be doing.
So maybe in the next Zombies game, we might see the Victus crew in some shape or form. Monty and the Shadow Man are the same being. This is just a really old theory talking about Monty and the Shadow Man being essentially the same person. Kind of similar to having like a good and a bad Richtofen, you had a good, well, quote unquote good and a bad Shadow Man / Monty. And that's something to do with the Dark Ether ended up splitting one person into two. Now nowadays we know that this isn't really a thing because Monty specifically addresses the Shadow Man as like one of his best friends, like BFFs for life. But for a time this theory was a pretty interesting one and was pretty plausible. Venus Cipher. This is talking about a cipher that can be found in Revelations that reads, October NSA report, T. They found the source on Venus beginning extraction. And that's all we got. We really never learned more about this. I've seen plenty of theories of people talking about it possibly being like the summoning key or even more 115 or something we don't really know about, but that's it. I couldn't find anything else talking about Venus and extracting things. So if you know anything more about this, please let me know, but as far as I know, they kind of just threw this in here and then never talked about it again. Agartha Vril pre-Black Ops 3 retcons. Before we had the Keepers that we know nowadays, we had the Vrilia. The Vrilia were kind of first introduced in Call of the Dead with the Vril, or the VR11 and the Golden Rod. But as we progressed on with the story and as zombies got bigger and bigger, and as Jason Blundell took over Jimmy Zielinski's spot, they slowly became, well not slowly, they just eventually became the Keepers. And you might be wondering, why did this happen? And I have seen a bunch of theories, but the main one is that the Vrilia originate from an 1871 German book called The Coming Race. And this went on to become a big part of Nazi occultism, which if you didn't know was a huge inspiration for the early zombie games. And it would make sense that as zombies got bigger and bigger, they would kind of want to distance themselves from anything and everything Nazi related. So eventually the Vrilia would just go on to become the Keepers. And it really does fit with the trend of zombies becoming more alien based instead of Nazi occultism. You gotta do whatever you gotta do to make the money, I guess. Gorod Krovi Massacre. This is talking about the events that happened before the events of Gorod Krovi. In the official Zombies timeline, it reads April 14th, 1945. Sofia declares the Battle of Stalingrad is nearing victory for German forces, and that Valkyrie drones have been deployed to locate any resistant strains and attempt capture. After the release of large concentrations of Element 115 by German forces, the city becomes largely populated by the undead. Nikolai and his comrades continue to fight for what remains of Stalingrad. September 2nd, 1945. World War II still rages on. Stalingrad has turned into a three-way conflict between Dragon, Machine, and the undead. Without any remaining human survivors, Sofia is now trapped in the city. So it would seem that at Stalingrad, the Germans committed a huge massacre and eliminated everybody in the city, whether they be military or just innocent civilians. The Beacon. I believe this is talking about the beacon in The Giant. The first hint that we got of the beacon was in these two radios.
Remember what I told you, Edvard. The scars left by Samantha's past actions allow us to communicate across the rift. Follow my words. I will find you. When you release the beacon, I will secure your extraction and destroy the site. Remember, the burden is yours to carry, Edvard. The others must never know the truth.
Hey, other me. If you're hearing this, then it means that something's gone foobar. We're going to plan B. Stick to that crap bastard like glue. We need to find out what the hell he has been doing and what he's going to do. We may be able to get a fix on your location if you can trigger one of the Paradox visualizations. Good luck. We're all counting on you. Oh, wait. Whatever you do, don't get too close to the radioactive beacon. It makes your hair fall out.
So Maxis states that once you release the beacon, he will secure your extraction and destroy the site. And Dempsey also says to stay away from it because it will make your hair fall out. And to get the beacon, all you have to do is do the Flytrap Easter egg. And upon completion of the Flytrap Easter egg, Maxis says this.
I see it. The beacon is lit. I know where and when you are. Sooner or later, I will find you. Together, we will ensure a better future for the children.
So it seems like the beacon was a way for Maxis to locate our crew, and I would assume that its use was maybe similar back in World at War. Even though they never really had like a actual reason for us doing those steps, it was kind of just put in, but you can go back and edit the reason. Weasel breaks the premise cycle. So what we know of zombies is that it's full of cycles. We got cycles, trains, and don't ask what it was called back in Black Ops 1, because it was definitely not just called training. But this entry is referring to the fact that once Weasel breaks his Mob of the Dead cycle and finally, well, quote-unquote, frees himself, he is still trapped in this pocket dimension. And once Primus arrives during the events of Blood of the Dead, now that Weasel is finally free, he is able to help the Primus group actually break their cycle. And literally, if it was not for the Weasel breaking his cycle and coming to help the Primus group, things would not have ended well for them. And you would have never got the events that happened with Blood of the Dead. Well, like the events, like the Easter egg ending that we got and everything. Primus, Ultimus, Hive Mind. I believe this is talking about some of the dialogue interactions that you can have with the multiple characters in Alpha Omega. In that map, characters can talk to each other, and you can learn that all the characters kind of have shared memories, even if they never actually experienced it.
I do wonder how cathartic it could have been had you ever made it to Stalingrad.
Stalingrad? I think I have been. I fought traitor Russians with my big armored tank machine.
It's almost like there's some kind of common memory, shared regardless of individual experience. A hive mind.
You sound drunk, Richthofen. How many have had you? I mean, how many have you had?
I'm sorry you are the way you are, Nikolai. I'm sorry he, me, us, I don't know, did all those terrible experiments on you.
I like experiments, especially experiments with vodka.
So this goes to show you that all these characters are far more connected than we think. Hanging Bodies and Mob are the gangsters from past cycles. This was a very interesting theory that I think just kind of became canon because it was so interesting. If you look around Mob of the Dead, you'll notice that a lot of the hanging bodies are usually in groups of 4. And from what we know about Mob of the Dead, about how our characters are constantly repeating the cycle, it's pretty safe to say that they've died many and many of times. What are you going to do with their dead bodies other than hang them up around the map as decorations? Now, I don't think there's any real proof for this theory, but I consider it canon because it's just really interesting. Storyline inspired by real Nazi Agartha experiments. This is pretty true. The zombie storyline back in World at War Black Ops 1 was inspired by Nazi occultism. Things like Der Reese and the Flytrap were actually based on real-life things. But how true is the whole Nazi occultism? Were they actually out there looking for magic and trying to reach other realms and things like that? The answer is kinda no. The whole Nazi mysticism occultism thing is kind of really blown out of proportion. It was a thing, but not as popular as a lot of mainstream things nowadays make it seem. Hitler himself was actually not a fan of the occult, and it was actually more Himmler who was into it, and Hitler just thought of it as a stupid little side project, which is what it actually was for the Nazis. It was just a side project. The Nazis did finance a run for the Holy Grail, but after searching for a bit on the SS's dime, they eventually came up with nothing. The Black Sun, which may look pretty familiar, actually has its origins from Nazi Germany. So a lot of old school zombies was actually kind of based on real life, either theories or conspiracy theories about Nazi occultism. And there are plenty of videos that dive way more deeper into this, and it's actually really interesting, so I would definitely recommend taking your time and looking into this yourself. It's a pretty good rabbit hole. Three World Wars. This is a reference to a quote that Nikolai has on the Giant when talking to Dempsey, where he references that they've been allies through 3 world wars.
When did you last check? We were allies in all 3 world wars!
Now, of course, World War I and World War II we're pretty familiar with, but what would World War III be? Was it the Great War? Was it some unknown war? Was it an actual World War III-like scenario? Like, you know how we got the Cold War? Well, maybe that actually escalated? We really don't know. And this is going to be a common theme with a lot of entries from here on out, where it feels like Treyarch had an idea, implemented the start of it, but never really continued it. Brazil. Very similar to the 3 World Wars one, this is a quote by Dempsey when pack punching on the Giant that explains that at some point, they've been to Brazil.
This machine's been everywhere I have. France, Brazil, even the damn moon. Why is that?
Now, during my research, I saw a lot of people say this was Shangri-La, and this is like from a couple years ago, so, you know, give people a little leeway. But this is not Shangri-La. Brazil and the Himalayas are nowhere near each other. But back when the Giant was still new, this gave a lot of ideas that we would get a DLC in Brazil, which, as you know, we did not. Old Man Dempsey in Alpha Omega. So just prior to Alpha Omega actually coming out, some zombies artwork of what appears to be Dempsey but as an old man had surfaced and then was quickly, immediately KO'd. But the images still do exist. And I've seen a lot of people discussing this about what this could be for. Was it for like a map player model? Was it for a cutscene? And honestly, I kind of lean more towards actually being like the ending cutscene. Like we would have seen how these characters grew old and what their lives would have been like after the whole zombies thing. Because there were rumors that Treyarch was going to have more DLC for zombies and we would have gotten even more maps, but because of how Black Ops 4 went down and they actually just pushed all the resources to the next game, we never got that. So maybe the ending to zombies that they wanted to give us involved having our characters growing old and living the rest of their lives, and they didn't really want to give us the ending that they gave us. Comic book loading screens. So for majority of zombies, as you are loading into the map, you would see this comic book page. And in the page, it would give you a little hint and some teasers as to what exactly is happening in the story. Some things we really never got answers to, and some things are still just mysteries to this day. And these comic book loading screens would continue from Black Ops 1 to Black Ops 2. And they would eventually make a reappearance in the Zombies comic, like the actual physical Zombies comic. And in that, we had some alternate versions of the loading screens. And with these alternate versions, it would show a different timeline of events. And none of them kind of describe what is happening better than the Giant's alternate loading screen. In that one, you can see that Richthofen shooting himself had drastic changes on everything that's happening. And that is kind of the same theme with the rest of the loading screens. Because of the events that are happening in the storyline, things are being rewritten and things are changing. So each of the loading screens are going to have minor variations and minor differences compared to their original counterparts. And we could spend like all day talking about every minute difference, but if you haven't read the zombie comics, they're actually pretty interesting, so definitely check them out, even if it's just to see the alternate loading screens. Unknown events between Origins and the Giant. So we have a general idea of what exactly happened between Origins and the Giant. The Primus group frees Samantha, and then she sends them to the Giant. But it's not like that's instantaneous. There was some downtime between those two events that we really don't know what Nikolai, Dempsey, and Takio were up to. In the official Zombies timeline, in Dimension 63, June 4th, 1918, Origins, Element 115 awakens the undead knights from the Great War, and quickly consumes the camp. Maxis is rendered catatonic by the elements. Richthofen removes his brain before he turns. Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takio unite with Richthofen on the battlefield and help free Samantha from her imprisonment in Agartha. Primus has reunited. Samantha sends Primus to their next destination. Maxis' brain arrives in Agartha, and Dr. Monty decides to step in. Monty brings Maxis' brain to the house and wipes the Maxis corrupted by Dark Ether from existence. And then in the original dimension, June 4th, 1943, Primus arrives from Dimension 63. In an effort to prevent the events that are about to unfold, they formulate a plan to stop this dimension's Richthofen. And the events of the Giant don't happen until October 13th, 1945. So it seems like there was some considerable time between Samantha teleporting them to this dimension and the Giant actually taking place and creating a fracture. Because that's why like Richthofen killed himself, was to like create this fracture and anomaly and other space-time mumbo-jumbo. But what exactly were they doing between the events of Origins and the Giant? We kind of know what Richthofen was doing. He was dicking around trying to get summoning keys and chronoriums and hopping around with Maxis. But we really don't know what the rest of Primus was doing. For all we know, they could have been like discovering the internet, like going forward in time and like jerking off to like the endless amount of OnlyFans, or they could have just been drinking in bars. Who knows what they were doing? BO2 is a cycle. Now this theory is actually pretty freaking interesting, and I kind of buy into it. I think during like Black Ops 2's life cycle, this was actually pretty plausible. And I think this is maybe what Jimmy Zielinski was actually aiming for, but kind of got pushed to the side with the more recent games. But this theory would explain why we have two different Easter eggs and how it would make sense storyline-wise. So the theory states that the events of Black Ops 2, so Transit, Die Rise, and Buried with the Victus crew, are happening in a constant loop. Well, only when you do the Richthofen Easter egg. In order for Richthofen to continue power, he has the events of Black Ops 2 in a constant time loop, and this loop can only be broken when you do the Maxis Easter egg. So think about it. Why does Primus Richthofen need the Alcatraz's crew's blood vials? And we think it's because that they were in a universe that was closed off. Well, what if it was because they were stuck in a time loop? What if they needed people's blood that had been stuck in a time loop? We do know about the Mob of the Dead crew and their time loop, and with this theory, we also have the Victus crew in a constant time loop. So what if the insurance policy just needs someone to have been in a loop? If we take a look at a cipher from Gorod Krovi, we get this interesting cipher. Finally, the lab is almost complete. Security measures have been put in place, so the chance of detection by the Americans is very unlikely. We also have several agents embedded with the staff as insurance. We will keep the individuals in stasis, on ice to speak, and continue the specimen rotation. Once we finish drawing more power from the drill. Oh, I almost forgot. The sequencing for the current blood samples is as followed: SS, MJ, ABR, and those are the Victus crew's initials. And the interesting line of that is the continue the specimen rotation. What if the specimen rotation is referring to the Black Ops 2 loop? What if they want it to continue because they're not ready for them to actually break it yet? They're currently still working on all of their plans and are not ready for them to actually break it. And another thing that this would explain would be the nav cards in Black Ops 2. How come you can have the buried nav card and still go and play Transit with it? That really, storyline-wise and just timeline-wise, shouldn't make sense unless they're in a constant loop. And if we take a look at Buried's Easter egg, during that Easter egg, both sides have a wisp step, and both Maxis and Richthofen say something that's pretty interesting about it.
You must ensure the lantern is safe from harm. The energy contained within is essential to illuminate the words of those who came before you. Their wisdom will show you the way. Though they failed to complete the task, the others left clues for those who followed. Only a burst of electricity will have the brute force necessary to release the energy bound to this realm.
Maxis states that the spirits of those who came before you, and he says while some failed to complete this task, the others left clues for those who follow, and that the energy is bound to this realm. So it's clear that the wisp energy exists of the spirits of the people who were there before. And with Richthofen's quote, he says, "It will make you sad."
Maxis calls it a wisp. It's really just a ball of life force imprisoned in this place for all eternity. It is probably best not to dwell on what it really is. It will make you so sad.
What if that's because the Wisp is actually the previous Victus crew? What if the Wisp is just the imprisoned life force of the Victus crew, but in the previous cycle? And there's this theory that states that during the Infinity Round and the Buried Easter Egg step, how that's only in the Richthofen quest, that this is when the Victus crew was sacrificed in the previous cycle, was during this Infinity Round. And that would be why Richthofen's and Maxis' Wisp both look different. So after the events of Buried, what happens? Well, they get taken back to Transit and the whole thing starts all over again. If we take a look at this tweet from Jimmy Zielinski back in February 23rd of 2020, he says, "The eternal return theory. Gamers be like, duh." What is the eternal return theory? Well, this is a philosophical concept which states that time repeats itself in an infinite loop, and that the exact same events will continue to occur in exactly the same way over and over again for eternity. And the last little interesting thing about this theory is if you decide to go with the Maxis route, Richthofen has this quote at the end of the Easter egg.
I've been trapped for all eternity! Do you have any idea how long that is?
And what's interesting is he says he's going to be trapped there for eternity. That's because he knows how long this cycle has been going on. He knows that this may be eternal due to the loop. Now, I tried my best to explain this, and honestly, there's still a lot of things about this theory that I don't completely understand, and there is a lot of other stuff that I left out, but to me it kind of does make sense, especially with the whole 2 Easter egg thing. I think this is what Jimmy Zielinski really wanted the entire time, because as we know in zombies, they love them some infinite time loops. Red Eye Zombies Monty Connection. So for the longest time, we seemed to think that the zombies that had the red eyes were either being controlled by Monty or the Shadow Man or some other evil force. And this theory persisted for quite a long time, until kind of recently when the truth was revealed.
Sometimes our personal touches are accidental. When we were working on Black Ops 2, we were like a new team working on it, and we hadn't quite caught up with all of the rules yet. And so when we were determining the eye color for Mob of the Dead, a producer got asked like what color to make them, and he's just like, I don't know, red. And then with Q2, like we released the trailer, and the community is like, what is this third faction? What do the red eyes mean? And we're like, oh, okay.
So the red eyes don't really have any big significance other than the fact that they looked cool. Nero jump scare in Mob of the Dead. In Mob of the Dead, you can activate this jump scare. And that person looks awfully familiar. He looks kind of like Nero from Shadows of Evil. Now there is another way to activate this jump scare, and it kind of looks something like this. And in order to do this, there are 3 things that cannot happen. 1, you cannot be on the Golden Gate Bridge. 2, background lightning cannot be being played. And 3, you have to have the plane zapped. And I think someone actually did the math, and with how rare this Easter egg is, your chances of getting this is just 1 second within 28 hours. So it's very, very rare that this will ever actually happen. Alpha Omega Suspicious Richtofen. So during Alpha Omega, both Richtoffens, the rest of the group kind of looks at a little suspicious. They really don't trust Ultimus Richtofen, and that's because he's Ultimus Richtofen, but they don't really trust Primus Richtofen either. And we have a bunch of quotes to support this.
Why do I think you are avoiding certain subjects, Richtofen?
Ha! What could I possibly be avoiding, Takeo? I've been so transparent lately, I'm practically invisible.
That remains to be seen. When we were in the prison, you were fearful. Fearful of what you thought was to come.
Why are we even talking about this, Takeo? It all worked out perfectly. We beat the warden and escaped our seemingly eternal purgatory. Yay!
That is not what I remember, Richtofen. Something in your story does not add up.
Goodness me, Takeo, you're very paranoid. Next thing you'll be asking me about blood vials. Never mind my ramblings, Takeo. I get confused sometimes. There's so much to do. A vessel for Maxis, the opening of the gateway. 9! I am getting confused!
Damn these 115-induced delusions.
We fought our way out of a literal Hellcatraz, Richtofen, where you looked scared shitless for the first time. Question is, why?
He'd gotten a few things wrong, that's all. Silly old me. Too emotional. Anyway, I had to step in.
Something's off with you, Richtofen. More than usual. But I'm damned if I can remember what it is.
So we know Ultimus Richtofen is just evil and he might betray everybody, whenever he wants to. But the Primus one is kind of interesting. Nothing ever came of this, but I'm interested to know, what if Black Ops 4's life cycle got extended? Were they actually planning on this Richtofen being an imposter and maybe doing something with that? We may never know, but it is an interesting theory. Blundell forced to make Chaos story. This I think is probably one of the more dumber theories on this list, because I genuinely think Blundell wanted to make the Chaos story because he's really into that kind of stuff. But the theory kind of goes that Blundell was forced to do the Chaos story because they wanted to separate itself and start something new and give more, life into zombies. This theory is just so dumb. I can see exactly why Blundell would want to make the Chaos story so they could experiment with more stuff, but it never ended up going anywhere. And I really couldn't find any evidence to back this theory up, so I think this one's just kind of a big nothing burger. But if you know more about this, please let me know, but it seems kind of dumb in my opinion. Budget cuts ruined the storyline. This is like 100% true. We all kind of know that Black Ops 4 was going to be much grander. They were going to have more zombie maps and just so much more added into it. But due to budget cuts and them needing more people to work on other games, Black Ops 4 kinda got the short end of the stick. And that's why the zombies mode kinda seems rushed when it comes to the story, and why we just got a bunch of old school reused maps. I really don't think this is how Treyarch wanted the storyline to go, and I believe they had much bigger plans intended, but unfortunately, what are you gonna do? Activision's Activision. Primus team up with Ultimus Richthofen. This is talking about one of the alternate loading screens that shows the Primus group, minus Primus Richthofen, going to the house with Ultimus Richthofen. And this doesn't really make any sense. I mean, you can make it make sense with the amount of time travel, dimension hopping, and everything that goes on in the story. Technically, anything is possible. But it still doesn't explain anything, and it's really confusing. But we do know that there was some periods in time where the Primus group was without Richthofen, and the Ultimus group was also without Richthofen. In Ascension, we have this radio from Dr. Monty.
Ascension, the Russian Cosmodrome. I know Nikolai can be a bit down on Soviet technology, but the Ruskies really pulled one out of the bag that time. The Ascension group built a bloody great rocket. It actually worked a treat, too. Do you remember Gersh? Bald guy, he fought alongside you for a while. I think Richthofen was off somewhere at the time. Anyway, Gersh ran into a little bit of dimensional distortion. Honestly, why do you insist in meddling with stuff you don't understand? Of course, all their experiments just stirred the reality soup even more. You ended up fighting monkeys. Space monkeys at that. As I'm sure you know, monkeys are thieving little bastards. Give them half a chance and they'll nick anything that isn't nailed down. So, in answer to a question Richthofen once asked, I don't love a monkey.
And in that, he confirms that the bald man was Gersh, but he also says that Richthofen was off doing his own thing. So maybe at some point when both teams were missing their Richthofen, Ultimus Richthofen ended up going to the house with the Primus group. And doing what? Your guess is as good as mine. There's a lot of stuff in the zombie storyline that's very, very confusing, even to this day. Illuminati is made up of alternate Richthofens. Now this is a pretty interesting theory that states that the Illuminati is just made up of like multiple universes Richthofens all working together. There really isn't much proof to support this other than this one Stullinger quote.
Hello? Is this thing on? Richthofen! Hey, Richthofen! You've been gone from my head a really long time. I gotta be honest, I'm freaking out a bit, man. It's so quiet. I can actually hear myself think. Do you know what that's like? It's not nice at all. So, listen, buddy, old pal, we gotta talk. You sent us here, of all places, but you forgot to tell us what to do. It's dark, it's damp, it's just really filthy. I think the roaches are crawling with roaches. How is that even possible? Wait, shoot. Am I even talking to the right Richthofen? Oh, you could be the other one, right? Or the other one. Yeah, you know what? Just go talk to your Richthofen pals at the hoity-toity Ricky Gang Clubhouse and find out what the we're supposed to be doing.
So in that quote, he talks about Richthofen and his Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, but no real definite evidence that the Illuminati is just all Richthofens. But I mean, the possibility is still there. The Illuminati is one of the more secretive organizations in the Call of Duty Zombie storyline. They don't really have too big of an impact, but they still do have little impacts here and there. So I wouldn't dismiss this theory, but we really don't have too much evidence to support it. Rite of Spring. This is a reference to an agreement with the Soviets that Richthofen has that stipulates a list of materials that he needs, and just a couple of those is a pet monkey, one recording of Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, one cosmonaut spacesuit, and one lunar lander, coordinates to be specified. One miniature replica of St. Basil's Cathedral, one Fabergé egg yolk, and one bottle of Stalin's vodka to see what all the fuss is about. So in that, you'll notice that he wants a copy of The Rite of Spring. And I will talk about that a little bit more on a different entry, but for right now, just know that Richthofen wanted that book. Memory loss in The Giant. This is a reference to numerous quotes that our characters have that indicate that they are suffering some sort of memory loss.
Infestation confirmed. Positive identification of 115 on site. As expected, my memory's slipping. Unable to determine current jump count to this location. 2 at least, maybe more.
Fear the Emperor's displeasure. I know not where he is, but yet I remain loyal. This I must never forget.
German, I will keep asking until I get an answer. What are we doing here?
They forget what their purpose is and what they are doing at the Giant. Despite in the intro cutscene, they know exactly what they're there for. So this just adds to like the hundreds and thousands of mysteries of the Giant. Samantha, imposter, and origins. This is talking about a theory that states that the Samantha that we are interacting with in Origins isn't really the same one that we had on Moon and the one we had in Alpha Omega. She sounds completely different and has an American accent.
I'll torture Edward when I get the chance. I'll play with his kidneys and swallow his bile. 1, 2, gun is true. 3, 4, 12 Borgor. 5, 6, evil tricks. 7, 8, set the bait. 9, 10, kill again!
I'm not safe here. You have to hurry. Only the Giants can break the seal. We are so close. Please, keep going. Release the souls of the ancients.
We're going to fight the war, Eddie. The great war. Then, we're going back to the house to kill him and burn it all to the ground. Agartha, the ether, the infinite, everything.
And the theory goes that when she is in Origins, she's being influenced by Monty. She's not really in complete control of what she's doing. And that's why she acts and sounds very, very different pre-Origins and post-Origins. After Alpha Omega, she is able to break free of Monty's influence and revert to her normal self. Dempsey remembers the cycle. This is a reference to one of the quotes that Dempsey has in The Giant, where he says this.
As expected, my memory's slipping. Unable to determine current jump count to this location. 2 at least, maybe more.
So now does Dempsey remember every single time that they're in the cycle? No, but due to one of the previous entries, we do know that they all have a hive mind and are sharing very similar memories. So perhaps some of his older memories are coming in and influencing his current decisions. Stuhlinger is a CIA agent. I really like this one because I guess it's kind of true in a weird way. In the game files, Stuhlinger is referred to as a reporter. And in 2013, David Boat, who is Stuhlinger's voice actor, described him as a CIA agent. In an interview, he was asked this question: what have been some of your previous roles and which did you enjoy the most? And one of his answers was, currently I'm a certified nutjob CIA agent, Stuhlinger, in the zombie element of Black Ops 2. The role is very fun, and they let me play with the delivery of the script, which is always extra fun. So maybe Stuhlinger isn't just crazy, maybe the government made him that way. The house is in a pocket dimension. So I found a really interesting post that went way in detail talking about the house, what it is, and it actually explains the Giant radios. So I'm going to read you guys this whole thing because it really cleared a lot of things up for me. As odd as it sounds, the house initially seems to originate outside a pocket dimension, within our regular physical Earth. The house area in Revelations is in-game called Sheffield, a city in central England, which location also seems to be hinted at in the alternate Die Rise loading screen. Interestingly enough, Maxis seems to have found his way to it before the apocalypse, and the subsequent knock on the door and Monty's arrival. We'll get to that later on. Perhaps this could have anything to do with the teleporters in World at War Doresis indicating the abbreviations, GER for Germany, FAR for France, and curiously enough, ENG for England. Germany and France are confirmed to have had Group 935 facilities, and it would actually make sense since both countries were under Nazi regime. But the fact that Group 935 has a teleportation connection with England is quite intriguing. This, I think, may very well have been the house, Maxis' house. This could be why we are able to simply teleport to it in Kino der Toten, as it wasn't in a safely locked off pocket yet. When the Earth was blown to bits after the events of Moon, the house was too condemned to exist in the apocalyptic wasteland.
Day 66. The children are gone, and the house feels empty. I miss their laughter, their games. The sirens have not sounded for several months. I do believe that we may have turned the tide in the battle. But at what cost? The radiation levels from the fallout remain dangerously high. I can only pray I live long enough to confirm that my plan was indeed successful. And the dark presence that has haunted our dreams and infected every facet of our existence has finally been vanquished.
Keep in mind that at the time of Black Ops 3's release, alongside the giant radios, we were only one map away of Buried and the old story of Earth's destruction. Ironically, the destruction of Earth was Maxis' own intent, as he instructed Ultimus to launch the rockets. I believe that's why he notes that he may have turned the tide of the battle, but at what cost? But things changed when a man named Dr. Monty knocked on the door, offering his help to change the present by altering the past.
After so long in isolation, we had begun to believe that we were the only survivors of the catastrophic event that had shaped our lives. Supplies were beginning to run low, and I was forced to prepare for the worst outcome. Just as I feared that we were truly alone, just as I feared that the end was near, there was a knock at the door. He explained everything to me. He will explain everything to you. Though his very presence defied logic, defied reason, he told me that he would help. I could not refuse.
Let's go into the giant intro, where zombies start to break in after the freezing of time and Primus's arrival. This distracts them, which allows Ultimus Richtofen to link the MPD, as you can clearly hear the sound. Dempsey shouts at him, "Whatever you think you're doing, don't do it." Nikolai says that he does not want to meet what's on the other side of that door, and Takio warns him that he cannot begin to comprehend the great evil he could unleash. Despite their warnings, they do not simply kill Ultimus Richtofen, they seem to want him alive for some reason. Stubborn as he is, Ultimus Richtofen activates the teleporter, and the door subsequently opens. Primus Richtofen steps out and kills his Ultimus counterpart. Tank is angry at Primus Richtofen. "I thought we were done with this." But Richtofen tells them that things change. Nikolai says that only a fool would dare to change history, but Richtofen says he does so in order to secure a better tomorrow. From intel, we know this Primus Richtofen was told by Maxis to trust Monty's plan in order to save the world. He is sent by the house with survivors who have witnessed the destruction of Earth, and he is convinced that what he does to not let that happen again. He obeys Monty's plan, which include changing history at the Der Riese facility, to kill Ultimus Richtofen and not let the test subjects be awoken. As Maxis says, the test subjects can never be allowed to awaken. The havoc that could be wreaked upon the future by such simple-minded individuals would be catastrophic. The event happening at Der Riese is what we can call a nexus point, where various timelines converge. As the events of the destruction of Earth and the nuclear house happened after the events of Der Riese, in a reality where Ultimus Richtofen didn't open the MPD and Primus Richtofen never intervened. The future was altered as soon as the past was changed, according to Monty's plan. For Maxis, this may have felt very strange, as his own past also changed. His skin, caused by the fallout, vanished. The environment around him changed from a nuclear wasteland to a peaceful countryside. As the original outcome of the universe was changed, his old experiences first became vague memories and then vanished completely.
The siren has not sounded in many months. I am confused by the changing world around me. I look at my hands, and they are not the hands I remember. The wrinkles, veins, and liver spots that textured my skin have disappeared, as though time itself was unraveling against its natural order. Is this the end, or a new beginning? Reality itself is shifting. I find myself reflecting on memories I am no longer sure are my own. Beyond the window, I saw a wasteland, stretching as far as the eye could see. I saw a scourge visited upon the earth, I saw the children withered before my eyes. That was before he came. Samantha has been returned to me once more. As have you, Edvard. As have you.
The content of Monty's plan, which eventually saved the house, was to collect the souls of our 4 heroes, a process which takes the entirety of Black Ops 3. The use of the souls may have multiple reasons, but I believe one of them may be elevating the house to a pocket dimension. In Morgue City and Alcatraz pockets, we learned that it takes a sacrifice to actually create a pocket dimension. What's more, Morgue City and Alcatraz require, respectively, the 4 souls of our Shadows crew to be poisoned, and the death of the 4 mobsters on the electric chair. In case of the house, the 4 souls attached to the ether via the elemental shard may have been used to create a pocket of the house. One last thing regarding the house and awakening of the test subjects. As we know, Primus Nikolai, Tank, and Takio were on their way to Ultimus Richthofen, telling him to awaken the test subjects. Then Primus Richthofen intervenes, and suddenly, they all agree on not to awaken the test subjects, an order given by no one else than House Maxis. I believe this is because of the time-alternating event that Richthofen's intervention is, similar to how Maxis' memories were changing after this event, how the house was suddenly healing. Primus Richthofen misleads them by writing their confusion off as 115-induced delusions.
Never mind my ramblings, Takeo. I get confused sometimes. There's so much to do. A vessel for Maxis, the opening of the gateway. 9! I am getting confused!
Damn these 115-induced delusions.
So in the original timeline, the timeline where Ultimus Richthofen didn't open the MPD, and Primus Richthofen never intervened, the rest of Primus insisted on waking up the test subjects together with Ultimus Richthofen. A tale that could be shown on this comic page. As you can see, the alternate comic page with Primus Richthofen killing his Ultimus counterpart can be seen after this page, indicating that this current event of Primus and Ultimus Richthofen was supposed to happen prior to the history changing at the Giant. The test subjects, whether they had to be awoken or not, seem to have a prominent role in either Primus's or Monty's plan. For a long time, I thought it was talking about the Ultimus test subjects, but rather, could it be perhaps referring to Victus? Let's consider the theory that the events of Black Ops 2 occur in a cycle. Whilst Victus are still actually cryogenically frozen in the Alcatraz pocket dimension, invisible from Monty, Richthofen's soul, which is in zombies after the Maxis ending in Buried, says there has to be a way to break the cycle. If it is true that the Maxis path in Black Ops 2 is actually the one that makes the Victus cycle to occur over and over, it is logical why Maxis and Monty never want them to be awoken from their pods. On the other hand, Ultimus Richthofen with Primus do want to awaken them, as this may also lead to breaking the large cycle they are stuck in, which would be like the entire game's cycle, like all the multiple games, not just Black Ops 2. So that is the entirety of the house explanation. Hopefully that cleared a lot of things up, because honestly, it makes a lot of sense to me, and everything I just read, I choose to believe is true. KN44 storyline significance. So we already talked about this earlier with the Impossible Easter egg, and I'm just going to refer you to, again, the video I linked down below in the description that goes way more in detail about the Impossible Easter egg, so check that out. Takio diddled by the giant spider. This is a very infamous theory in the Call of Duty Zombies community that states that the big spider in Zetsubo no Shima may or may not have diddled Takio. And it's a really dumb theory, but it's so stupid, but it does have a tad bit of, well, maybe, that it's kind of true, but also pretty much not. So it seems that the spiders in Zetsubo no Shima are based off of Lovecraft's Lang spider, or the Spider of Lang. And in the video that people always talk about that says, hey, Takio was diddled by a spider, they always bring up how the spiders are infernal, like the male spiders cannot mate with the female spiders. So the female spiders would enslave male men and diddle them and basically create more spiders. But in all my research, I could not find anything that backed that up at all. In fact, Lovecraft himself barely even wrote about the spiders of Lang, and in his writings about them, he most certainly really didn't talk about their breeding. And I scoured the internet for a while, and really there's not much information about these spiders of laying. On a website called Cthulhu Eternal, it does talk about their egg laying, and it says there is a widespread fear of spiders laying their eggs inside living victims. These spiders really do it. And that's really all I could find about these spiders of laying. If there is any information about them capturing males and diddling them, then it was most certainly not by Lovecraft himself and was by secondary authors. And really the only other piece of evidence that people use is in one of the Zetsubo Nishima videos that Treyarch posted. We get some Imperial soldiers bringing Takeo in front of the giant spider. And that's all the evidence that we got. So did Takeo get diddled by a giant spider? No, not in the way you're thinking of. I wouldn't be surprised if they used Takeo as a host for them to lay eggs in and then sprout out more spiders, but the diddling you're thinking of, I'm gonna say no, that didn't happen. Specimen rotations. We already talked about this, I feel like, enough with the whole Black Ops 2 cycle and everything, but in this cipher, we believe that the specimen rotation is actually talking about the Victus crew and using them in order to break the cycle. Zombie Richthofen greatly affects the storyline. So Zombie Richthofen is mainly present in the Call of Duty Zombies comics, and in the comics he actually does have a pretty important part. He is basically used to guide Victus to their locations and help them out when they need it. He is pretty much working for Primus Richthofen and allows Primus Richthofen to get Victus's blood and the Granorium. And if it was not for Zombie Richthofen, a lot of the story, I guess, technically wouldn't happen. Primus uses Icarus to travel through dimensions. So this is talking about the Primus crew minus Richthofen. So we already talked about Icarus and how that we do know when it's flying, it is traveling throughout dimensions. And this theory states that the Primus group, minus Richthofen, used Icarus to actually get to the giant, and that's why it's there. So they didn't like walk up or like hail a taxi to get there. This would explain that 2-year gap a little bit more, but we still have many questions. Robot Maxis and Cyborg Zombie in Kino. I'm putting both of these together because I feel like they're pretty intertwined. So the theory states that there is an alternate version of Maxis out there that is either part cyborg or is all robot. And that is not too crazy considering Origins, where we literally had Maxis flying a drone, so Maxis being a robot somewhere in the universe isn't too far-fetched. But in the Zombie Chronicles Kino Knocking Mystery Man Easter egg, the audio that you can hear sounds an awful lot like Maxis constructing some kind of robot. With him saying 21 goes here, 31 on the right, and one part goes here, and the other one goes here, and then right above his eye, it sounds like he's working on some kind of machine. And in a Revelations radio, after Sophia is infected by a zombie, he turns her into the Sophia that we know, and he says that he saved her the only way he knew how.
This is Dr. Ludwig Maxis, beginning preliminary trials for the Strategic Operations Planning Heuristic Intelligence Analyzer.
What's happening? Ludwig? Dr. Maxis?
Hello, Sophia.
Where am I? It's so dark here. I can't see anything.
That's all perfectly normal. How are you feeling?
I feel nothing. What have you done to me?
I saved you, Sophia. I saved you the only way I knew how.
Oh, Maxis. What have you done?
And in the official timeline, it states that an alternate Maxis had constructed the Zero Base. The Zero Base is the one that the Victus crew goes to in the comics. And in the base, there are a lot of half-robot, half-zombie cyborgs running around and guarding it. So it's a pretty far-fetched theory, but we do know that Maxis learned how to merge with electricity, so maybe there is a robot Maxis out there building cyborg zombies. It's honestly pretty plausible. Richtof and Dempsey, Alcatraz secret. This is a reference to a quote that you can get on Revelations, where Dempsey maybe knows a little bit more than he lets on.
So, answer me honestly. Just how much of this chaos is your fault? Did our little trip to Alcatraz have anything to do with it?
Be quiet, Dempsey. I told you, that's our little secret.
So now you have to remember, this was before, like, Blood of the Dead and everything. So at the time, this was actually pretty big. What did Dempsey know that Richtofen didn't want getting out there? Or at least that's what I'm assuming they're talking about, is Blood of the Dead. Well, not like the events of Blood of the Dead, but like Alcatraz as a whole, and like how they have a secret base there and everything. It's hard to like go back and think about things and pretend like you don't know a lot. But I'm assuming that's what Dempsey and Richtofen are talking about, is that super top secret base in Alcatraz. Real life Agartha. Believe it or not, Agartha is actually a real place. Kind of. Agartha is a legendary kingdom that is said to be located on the inner surface of the Earth, and this is sometime related to the belief in a hollow Earth. With the first real mention of Agartha being in 1873, and it slowly gaining more and more popularity until after World War I, where German occultist groups, such as the Thule Society, took an interest in Agartha. And there's a lot of different myths and rumors about Agartha. Like, some people would say that the entrance is in Antarctica, and some people would say that it's being populated by lizard people, so the theories out there are pretty wild. But the Agartha that we know in Zombies is actually based off some real-life legends. Ultimus Richtofen made the Dark Mechanism. So you know the Dark Mechanism in Blood of the Dead, the thing that Richtofen jumps in the cutscene. Well, there is a theory that suggests that it was actually made by Ultimus Richtofen. There are a couple pieces of evidence. There's a drawing that was done by Weasel that looks exactly like Ultimus Richtofen, which would mean Weasel at some point had to have seen him. Now, did he just see him at Alcatraz, or was there visions of him? We don't know, but there is the connection. And there are also a couple quotes that would hint that the Warden wasn't really smart enough to do this by himself.
How could I have underestimated the Warden this much? How could he have the knowledge to build... Unless...
And I've also seen people refer to this chalkboard and the fact that it says no fail-safes madness, and that it kind of does look like a teleporter, that this could also be another connection to Ultimus Richtofen. So I'm not exactly sure how this would fit in with the story, but I do like the idea and the theory, so I choose to believe it. Tag der Toten is in a pocket dimension. Now this would make a little sense because we have played a lot of maps that were in pocket dimensions. So it would seem that this pocket dimension is all tied to Pablo. It would seem that his soul is the thing that holds it together. And the reason that we think this is a pocket dimension is because of what Pablo says.
Day 521. I still don't know how it is possible, but late last year, I awoke from a watery grave. When I swam to the surface, I found the German military base abandoned. Only the undead remained on their shores. I attempted to flee, but the fog, it seemed no sooner that the shore faded behind me, it reappeared in front of me. Every attempt I made to escape, it led me right back here. As if I was meant to be here. I have begun broadcasting a radio signal. I'm hoping that someone will answer and come to my rescue. But if no one comes, I'm not sure how much longer I will survive this place.
He claims that he's been trying to escape, but he always just ends up right back to the lighthouse. Why would that happen? Well, if you're in a pocket dimension, you're really not going to be able to escape and go anywhere, and you're always just going to end up back where you started. And I feel like a lot of people don't really buy into this, but I actually kind of do, especially for the other entry that's on this list, which we'll get to here in a second. Empty Earth Maxis is GK Maxis. So remember how we talked about the cyborg zombies and Maxis and everything, and the alternate Maxis? Well, this theory states that the Maxis from Gorod Krovi is actually the one that built the Zero base from the zombie comic and was building all of these cyborg zombies. And really the main connection that we have is Gorod Krovi itself, how it's all kind of like futuristic tech zombies, like you have a bunch of cyborg-esque things roaming around the map, and also the fact that there is a Sophia in Gorod Krovi, and there's also one at the Zero base in the zombie comics. Now it's not too much evidence, and it is definitely a stretch, but I can kind of see it. It's not really the most definite theory, but I can see it. Buried and Moon are closer than you think. So this is not actually the one that was here. The one that was here, just I feel like we've talked about it a million times, and I just didn't want to talk about it again. It's the Argartha house stuff. We're done talking about the house. So I decided to input my own that I really like. So a couple years ago, Glitching Queen uploaded this video where she explains how she found the real life location of the buried maze. And she tells us that the buried maze is actually real and is located in Missouri. So eventually, Jimmy Zielinski tweets out, "Anyone ever locate the hedge maze IRL?" where she responds with her video. And then he responds with a set of coordinates. And she responds, "Got any more cords lying around?" And he says, "Well, no, perhaps follow the other connections." So some people followed the connections and ended up finding the real life inspiration for the biodome, which is located, surprisingly, right next to the buried maze IRL. And I definitely plan on going to both of these locations at some point because that's pretty freaking awesome. And I really love like exploring video game locations in real life, so hopefully I can do that someday. But Glitching Queen ended up messaging Jimmy and said, "Hi Mr. Zielinski, I'm about to make a video about the Climatron, which is the IRL biodome, being the possible inspiration for the biodome on Moon. I was wondering if there was anything you were able to say about the Climatron and the IRL buried maze." And Zielinski responds, "I prefer to keep my MO and be vague and mysterious, but it's safe to say, maybe. Just maybe those locations are not just close IRL. Have a great show, best Jimmy." So not only are Moon and Buried IRL close to each other, but it would seem that there's a much closer connection in the game. Maybe timeline-wise, they happen very, very close. And she also points out one more thing. Someone asked Jimmy Zielinski if there was an Easter egg in the Buried intro scene, and he says yes. And the Easter egg is that in the Buried cutscene, it actually plays the Moon loading screen song.
Enough walking for today. Enough walking for today.
So there's something between Moon and Buried. They're much closer than we think. And if you remember back to the Black Ops 2 as a cycle, this would make a lot of sense. After the events of Buried, the cycle would restart and the events of Moon would happen all over again, thus making Buried and Moon not just close IRL, but also in the zombies timeline. Togdur Toten is on Phobos. This theory suggests that the events of Togdur Toten actually take place on one of Mars's moons, Phobos. And I really don't buy into this theory as much as I think there's another explanation. I think the events of Togdur Toten take place in a pocket dimension in Siberia or wherever else you want to say it is. I don't think it takes place on Mars. Or I should say on one of Mars's moons. I should clear that up. But I do think as you are doing this Easter egg, as you are swimming through the tunnel, you are being teleported to Phobos. I think there is some kind of connection there. I saw a thread forever ago talking about this, and I could not for the life of me re-find it, but it basically was explaining that as you are swimming, the texture on the walls all of a sudden change, and that's when the teleportation actually happens. And that's when you end up on Phobos. Now there's probably a much deeper connection than just being, hey, this kind of explains Shangri-La a little bit. I think there's actually more connections there, but I prefer that theory than the one that this takes place on this moon. Icarus voices in Shadows of Evil. This entry is just talking about the voices that you can hear from the Icarus plane when you see it in theater mode in Shadows of Evil. Pretty self-explanatory, I know, right? And if you listen closely, it does sound like the mobsters from Mob of the Dead. So maybe as the plane is flying over, the mobsters are supposed to be on it, traveling to the Golden Gate Bridge. And again, from the cipher we talked about way earlier in this list, we do know that Icarus travels through dimensions to places that it shouldn't be. Unsolved Easter eggs. There are plenty of unsolved Easter eggs in Call of Duty Zombies. Whether it is the numerous unsolved ciphers in Black Ops 3, or the impossible Easter egg, or the little-known transit Easter egg that is still unsolved. In a Twitter thread like 4 years ago, somebody asked Jimmy Zelensky, okay, there's something more on transit not discovered, ? And he said, in the cabin or the train car. The sign was a door, not a blocker. And that just completely doesn't make any sense to me, but knowing Jimmy Zelensky and his whole MO being very vague and mysterious, we know that there's definitely something here. Now, I've seen a lot of people push back on this, saying, we've combed through the files, we haven't seen anything. Well, do you remember what Jason Blundell said? If they put it in the files, they know people are going to data mine it and figure what it is. And he was talking about the impossible Easter egg and how they can't make it be something like that because people will find it. So maybe this is exactly what Jimmy Zelensky's talking about. Maybe it's not like a, hey, you spin 3 times and shoot this and this happens. Maybe it's more of a connection that we never understood. And I just bet there are many more Easter eggs that we have not solved. Hell, I would bet that there's some in Black Ops 1 that we just never solved. I mean, if we go to Kino der Toten and we see Samantha, Abigail, and this other girl's name on the wall, what does any of that mean? And there's probably even way more on Black Ops 4 and Cold War that we haven't even begun to understand. So whenever you think that we've got all of zombies understood, just remember, you don't. Interdimensional rowboat. This theory sounds kind of dumb, like on surface, but it makes a little sense once you see some of the explanations for it. So if we remember that Tog der Toten is in a pocket dimension, and when you do the Easter egg to get on Phobos, one of Mars's moons, at the end of the pier you see a rowboat. And the theory states that since Tog der Toten is in a pocket dimension, this rowboat is how you enter and exit it. And there is a couple pieces of evidence. In general, like history and mythologies, rowboats are commonly used as a means of transportation, generally in between the living and the dead. If we take some Greek mythology, for example, there is a person known as Charon, or Charon, I never know how to pronounce that, who is the ferryman of Hades, whose responsibility is to row the souls of the dead across the rivers to the underworld. And this is a very common trope of people using rowboats to access the underworld. And if we take a look at Blood of the Dead, you can actually find some drawings of a person rowing towards and away from Alcatraz, indicating that that's how they actually arrived and that's how they left. And we do know that the whole Blood of the Dead, Mob of the Dead does take place in a pocket dimension. So it would seem that, at least at some point in time, someone got on a rowboat and used it to enter these pocket dimension areas and used it to leave. The Giant Mysteries. This is just talking about many of the mysteries that are still in the Giant that we tried to explain in a lot of parts of these icebergs, but we really don't know the answer to a lot of these questions. Like, why is the Mob of the Dead plane on the roof? We have a good idea, but we don't really know. Why does Nikolai mention fighting in 3 world wars? What is the answer behind some of the radios? How did Primus get to the Giant? We know Samantha sent them there, but there was a 2-year window where they were just dicking around. Who are the test subjects? Are they the Ultimus crew or are they the Victus crew? And there's just so many more questions that we really don't have the answer to. We can speculate as much as we want, but I don't think we're ever going to get a definite answer. Real life cycle. So I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory, but there is a belief that the universe itself is on a constant cycle, like the events of the Big Bang, fish walking on land, creating humans, having butt sex with a monkey frog or whatever Mr. Garrison said in South Park. And then eventually, like, 9/11, Japan's weird hentai fetish, and then the sun explodes and it restarts all over again. So that would be the real world cycle, and that's what this is a reference to. There are some beliefs out there that think that we're just on a constant loop and it's always going to be like that with minor differences. Cut Washington, D.C. Arlington Cemetery Map. This one was a deep dive to go down because there's really not much information about it at all. And I don't know how plausible it is, but let's go. So in Classified, there is a document that reads 31st October 1962, Memorandum to the Secretary of Defense. Subject, classified experiment at secret Pentagon laboratory, evacuation advised. 1. At 10:25 a.m., event unknown. 100 dead humans reanimate in an unconscious frenzy. They are coming in hordes and seem to be going after any living thing they can find. We believe it is a virus, but have not yet gotten confirmation. 2. Whatever it is spreading at a rapid rate. Recommend DC be completely evacuated and quarantined until we know how to proceed. Number 3. The Advisory Committee for International Science and Engineering states that at the current rate, within the next 72 hours, 1 million people will be exposed to the infection. That number will only multiply until we can assess the cause and try to neutralize the spread. From the Joint Chiefs of Staff, this person, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now this is interesting because this memo happens 1 year before the events of 5. And this would explain why Kennedy actually already knows about the undead.
Sounds like someone breaking in!
It's just a storm, Dick. Sit down.
Oh my God!
It appears the Pentagon has been breached.
Zombies. Gentlemen, at times like these, our capacity to retaliate must be, and has to be massive, to deter all forms of aggression.
Now, there is a rumor that before Blundell stepped in and created Mob of the Dead and Origins, that the original final map of Black Ops 2 would have taken place in the Arlington National Cemetery, which is a military graveyard near the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and that the 5 crew would have been set as playable characters. And it's alleged at one point Kennedy would have been able to see his own tombstone. And since Zelensky ended up getting quote-unquote fired and Blundell took charge, the only real reference they have to this would be Weasel's name, Arlington. And the whole idea for the map would have been that the 5 crew used the MTD that was in the basement and ended up overloading it and caused a fraction in time and ended up at the Arlington Cemetery. And them doing that would have eventually led to the events of 5. There's really not much proof of any of this, and it's all just purely speculation, but it's interesting nonetheless. Ultimus Richthofen kills the children in the house. So this theory states that Ultimus Richthofen is a big old meanie and ended up committing a little bit of murder against some innocent children. So we do know from the alternate loading screen that Richthofen was at one point at the house with Primus. And if we take a look at some of Samantha's DE drawings, we can see a picture of Richthofen holding a knife with her dad and a mysterious door/teleporter thingy. I'm not sure what they were going with that. Like, goddamn kid, can't draw a little bit better? Jeez. So it seems like Richthofen came through a door and attacked her dad. And if this is Ultimus Richthofen, he certainly does have a grudge against Maxis. And the last piece of evidence is actually an earlier entry. One of the things that Richthofen demanded was a book called The Rite of Spring. And in that book, it tells the story of an ancient pagan society that performs necessary rituals for the upcoming spring as an absolute means of survival each year. And it may or may not, have a little bit of kid murdering. So with the book involving kid murdering for absolute survival, the drawing that Samantha did, and the proof that Richthofen was at the house, it's plausible that he did a little bit of child murdering. The true ending to the storyline. If I could ask Jason Blundell any question, this would probably be it. What did you actually envision the end of the storyline to be in Black Ops 4? Because as we know, it got axed about halfway through, and a lot of the things that they had planned, they were never able to do because of the lack of resources. And I guess the biggest piece of evidence would just be to look at the ending itself. It looks rushed and doesn't answer a lot of questions, and for the ending to the big storyline in Zombies, we didn't even get an actual cutscene. It's just a slideshow of images. And the ending just feels rushed and like a way to explain things so that way they could actually continue the storyline without all of the Monty and Shadow Man stuff that they had previously. So we may never know what the actual ending to Zombies was gonna be, but if you ever get a chance to ask Jason Blundell, make sure you ask him. 2 different cycles. Honestly, I would explore this and put there's probably like way more cycles than just 2. Because when I think about it, we have 2 main ones. Either Weasel dies in Mob of the Dead or he doesn't. And if he does die, the cycle continues, and if he doesn't, it sets up things for our characters to break the cycle. But then you also look at like the Giant and whether we awaken the test subjects or not. So it seems like it always branches down to 2 different ways. If Weasel dies or if he doesn't, if we awaken the test subjects or we don't, who knows how many cycles there are. I think that's what this is referring to. And like certain areas in the storyline where it's either do or don't, this is the important part, and we can only branch 2 different ways from this point on. Again, shout out to War Thunder for sponsoring this video and letting me make that ad. Make sure to check them out with my links down there below in the description and in the pinned comments, and play for free on PC, PlayStation, and on Xbox. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms, which will give you tons of cool stuff, including multiple premium vehicles. All this is only available for a limited time, so make sure not to miss it. Support my sponsors because they support me. Also, we gotta thank my beautiful Patreons. We got Brian Hahn, Person, Fat Lucky Potato, Icy Storm, B-Rad the Man, Giovanni Diaz, Mayall, G-Daddy Smackdown, Forg, Ty Mulan, Henry Heiberg, and Krillic Spitz. If you would like to be a Patreon supporter, link is right down there below in the description. You get videos early and you can berate me in Discord if you really want to. So that's going to be the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and make sure to check out the plush. We need a lot of pre-orders to get that, so if you want a pretty cool plush of a bunny girl, you know what to do. So that's it. You can go now. Leave.